Today we're going to be diving into how you can get into site precision without the hefty price tag. Yep, it is possible, and we're here to show you how. So today we're going to start by running through the basic concept of RTK GNSS. I had a look through the attendee list, and there's a few people there. I'm just not convinced that they've got a lot of experience with RTK GNSS. So we'll run through some of the really basics. We'll introduce Emlid's GNSS products and Mangoesmapping, our company that distributes Emlid here in Australia. And of course, with Nick and Nathan, we'll review some case studies of the application of Emlid in the education and vet sector. So our presenters today are going to be Nick, and Nick is a teacher for GIS and surveying at the Riverina Institute of TAFE. Nick is also the GIS and GIO Spatial Mapping Coordinator for the Yorta Nation Aboriginal Corporation. We'll also hear from Nathan Brooks English, Associate Professor of School of Health, Medical and Applied Science at CQUniversity, Australia. And my name is Alastair. I'm the CEO of Mangoesmapping and MapGear, Australia's distributor for Emlid's RTK GNSS Precise Positioning Solutions. Now, before we get started, we always love to know a little bit more about our audience. So we're going to have a quick poll, and we're going to have a draw to determine who the winner is of a merch pack for those that participate in our poll. So we just have a couple of basic questions here to understand your relationship to the education sector and what your experience is with Emlid. So if I can invite you all to please take a moment to respond to this poll, then we can have a look at the results shortly. Perhaps while we're waiting for those results to come through, I can share a little introduction to Mangoesmapping and MapGear. So Mangoesmapping is our full service company that provides training, consulting, support, and custom integration. If you'd like to look at integrating RTK GNSS technology in your business or replace some of your existing hardware and modernize your GNSS fleet, we can assist you with that at a deep and technical level. So we provide not just products, but also hands-on services and support all the way through. However, if you have access to a credit card and you want to buy some hardware at midnight on a Sunday night, you can jump onto the MapGear e-commerce site and you can do that easily there. And it's also really handy. Oh, here we go. We got some results. All right. So we've got the majority of our viewers are either researchers from uni or industry or just curious. And yeah, we've got a few newbies that are curious to know more and a whole bunch of regular users as well. So thank you and welcome to our regular users, and a warm welcome to our newbies who are curious to know more. Hopefully across the breadth of today's webinar, we can add value to all of the participants. And thank you again for joining us. So as I was saying, the other useful thing about MapGear is if you're preparing like a grant funding application or preparing, some form of proposal in the middle of the night and you need some prices on the spot and you don't want to wait for some grubby salesperson to get back to you the next day, feel free to jump onto the MapGear site and you'll have complete transparency, including all of the pricing that you need 24/7. So moving on from the introduction of these companies, let's briefly review some of the principles of GNSS. So GNSS stands for Global Navigation Satellite Systems, and these are networks of satellites that provide positioning, navigation, and timing data to GNSS receivers anywhere on Earth. Emlid receivers consume all of the constellations listed here, including GPS, the American constellation, GLONASS, the Russian satellites, Galileo, the European satellites, and Beidou, the satellites from China. GNSS receivers have the ability to receive a correction from a base, and the bases are established over a known point. And by broadcasting a correction from that known point, we can reduce the positional uncertainty for the rover, which is the GPS the guy's holding with a pole here, down to just a few centimeters and use that to locate existing coordinates for staking out a design and to precisely map features in the landscape. RTK, real-time corrections, can be delivered in multiple ways, including via radio communications between the base and the rover, as you see here, and also via internet-based corrections called NTRIP. So MTrip is an increasingly common pathway to receive corrections. Examples of this include AusCores, Hexagon SmartNet, and Emlid Caster. One thing to note though is that if you're planning to use MTrip, you'll require mobile coverage or internet connectivity at each end, at both the base and the rover. So if you're out in the middle of the desert, you'll need to depend on radio communications or satellite-based communications to receive corrections to your rover. So Emlid hardware. Emlid receivers are rugged, simple, and intuitive and work in the most challenging of environments. And they're all relatively affordable. So it's possible to scale your fleet to include many of them. Nathan may even speak to this later in the webinar. I don't know. But if he doesn't, maybe I'll tell some of that story. But it's a great example of, where the affordability of this hardware allows users to scale their fleet to include far greater numbers of receivers than they may have anticipated. And I think it's worth noting that while it's very affordable in comparison to the GNSS industry incumbents, these are trusted receivers. They're in use by survey firms, major mining companies, and state Commonwealth government agencies all over Australia, including even Antarctica. And much of the user simplicity results from Emlid's Flow software. So Flow is the name of the software that runs as an app. It's an app-based surveying software that can be used on your existing mobile device. And despite its design-led simplicity, Emlid Flow supports extensive survey functionality, including inverse and traverse functions, staking surfaces, creating custom libraries, and much, much more. The latest generation of Emlid receivers have only just been released, and we're yet to take delivery of these here in Australia. They were launched at the event in Europe where I lost my voice. More powerful than ever, they promise versatility and the potential for precise positioning, even in the remotest corners of the country, by leveraging NavIC L1 corrections. So satellite-based corrections are possible with these latest receivers. And this is the flagship, the new Emlid Reach RS4 Pro, and it has a new feature called Remote Point Capture. And you can see on the right-hand side, there's some screen grabs here from the Emlid Flow software. So the Reach RS Pro receiver captures a video of an area, and the Emlid Flow app on your mobile device then processes that video and allows you to select points in individual frames and get their precise coordinates using photogrammetry. And it's kind of, RTK accurate out to about 10 to 15 meters. So it's pretty handy. This method's useful for measuring objects in hard to reach or hazardous areas and areas with weak GNSS signals, such as building facades, points behind fences, under structural overhangs, that sort of thing. I'm going to play a 5-second video here. So this is called visual stakeout. And what we see is this forward-facing camera that makes it easy to locate an existing point. And once you get close to that existing point, the downward-facing camera switches into view and makes it really simple to correctly identify the precise location of that known point. So it's great for setting out engineering designs and also just for like relocating assets. Like imagine, I've actually done this at home. I've RTK'd in all of the pop-up sprinklers in my lawn because where I live, we have a lot of rain. My pop-up sprinklers get buried under dirt and grass every year, and I have to dig them out in the dry season, and it's pretty easy if I can just stake them out. So what I want to do now is invite Nathan to join the party. Oops, hang on. There we go. Hello, Nathan. So I guess I'd call Nathan a long-time Emlid user. Nathan's an associate professor for the School of Health, Medical and Applied Science at CQUniversity. Thanks for joining us, Nathan.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I might just stop sharing my screen because I think you've got some stuff to show us, right?
I do. I'm a uni lecturer, so I come along with slides.
All right, excellent. Were you born with them, or you just was it an acquired skill?
Probably somewhere PowerPoint, somewhere in my gene pool.
So possibly innate.
But I promise not to bore people. I'll be concise and quick here.
You're one of these animated lecturers.
I hope so.
Beautiful.
All right. Let me know when the screen is sharing.
Oops. Yeah, sure.
There we go. Share. There we go. Is it there?
Yeah, we can see it. GPS
Excellent.
on the beach.
All right. Great. Thanks, everybody, for coming today to see some examples of how we teach RTK, high precision GPS in the classroom. the way I do it is not nearly as complex or technologically forward as what Alistair's just shown. And a lot of it has to do with who I'm teaching to. And so I'll get into that a little bit. Mangoesmapping asked me to introduce myself a little bit about who I am. And so I'll just do that real quickly here. Nathan English. I teach at Central Queensland University, which is based out of Rockhampton. I'm based out of Townsville. And I teach into the Bachelors of Science and Environment and the Bachelor of Agriculture. But we also get lots of students from other places, including occupational health and safety. And we get a lot of students from the Bachelors of Education Secondary. So these are students who are going to end up teaching science, hopefully teaching science and maths at high schools. I teach a couple of units. The one I'm going to talk about today is environmental monitoring, which, of course, perfect subject to teach GPS and RTK GPS in. And I also teach soil science and conservation, among other biology units. And my research is really based around trees. I love trees, but I also like materials and landscapes. And so I do a lot of tree rings and climate, looking at, is it a big ring? Is it a small ring? Is it a wet year or a dry year? But I also love to date culturally and ecologically significant trees. That doesn't mean I take them out for dinner. What it means is I take a core from them and radiocarbon date them, and I can get a sense of how old that tree is, how quickly it grows. And it's especially important for trees that aren't able to be dated using tree rings. So a lot of tropical and subtropical trees fit into that category, but we still want to know how old they are and how quickly they grow. And then I look a lot at about the movement of natural and man-made materials across the Earth's surface through time, whether it's archaeological timbers or river waters from the top of the Himalayas to the Bay of Bengal. So that's sort of what I do. I do a lot of different things, but it's all around the natural sciences, and a lot of it is spatial. And so I'm not just using GPS in my work life, I'm also using it at home when I go to a new place, a new address. I also am a member of the SES and do search and rescue, and you bet we use GPS for that, especially on days like this when you can't see anything and you're still trying to figure out where you're going. So I'm really excited about GPS, and I'm really excited to share with you how I teach GPS and bring students, because students just use their phones and they're like, I don't know, it just works. So I really like to use my unit as an opportunity to show them how it works. We do this learning as part of this class. The students, who are mostly regional students, fly to Rockhampton, and then we go to an island off the Capricorn coast called Wappa. It's also known as Great Keppel Island. And there on Wappa, we do our learning. And I just want to acknowledge the Wappa people and their land and sea that they allow us to use for activities. They're wonderful to work with. They have 60,000 years of cultural and environmental knowledge, which for an environmental monitoring class is super great, and that they share that with us. And we're delighted to walk with them as we learn about the past and work towards making Wappa a more sustainable place for both the Wappa Burra and other people as well. So excited to share this with them and with my students. So this is what a typical student cohort looks like. Let me just try and just move. Oops, sorry, just trying to move a picture out of here. Oh, why is this not letting me move backwards? There we go. So typically the students come to Wappa for 5 days. There's usually about 35 students in each class. We teach the class twice a year. We break them up into 3 groups of 12. And back in 2018 or 2019, I bought 7 Emlid GNSS. I think they're the Reach RS Plus receivers. And one of those functions as a base, and the other 6 function as rover units. And we got all the fun paraphernalia that goes with them, the poles and the cases. And don't forget the antenna. Don't do what I did and try and set these up without the antenna for the first 2 hours while you struggle. And a couple of things that we want to do is we want to meet our unit learning outcomes, which is where students should be able to describe briefly how global positioning satellite systems work. They should be able to describe the difference between a single receiver and an RTK GPS, how the base station helps send corrections to the rover unit. And then we also want them to use GPS devices to record locations and topography. And my goal is so that when the students go for a job interview and the interviewer asks them, have you ever used RTK GPS? The student can answer yes. While in their mind, they might be going like, oh my God, I can't remember a single thing. I know that I've actually done it. And so that's where our goal in this unit is to give them these hands-on lessons. And so we break them into 3 groups and they rotate through all the hands-on practical work over 5 days. We also purchased a bunch of Explore M60 rugged handheld computers, just basically a very large mobile phone from Alistair. And these are ruggedized. They're fantastic. They work the same 6 years later as they did when we first bought them. Students can't kill them. They throw them in the sand, they throw them in the salt water, they throw them against trees, they throw them in their backpack, and then they throw a rock hammer on top of it. And we haven't had one break yet. And the reason we bought these is because we were going to use these in conjunction with the Emlid devices, but then we figured out it's actually easier for students to just use their own mobile phones. And so in 2 separate exercises, we have the students use both a handheld device, and for those we use the M60 because we can load a GPS status app on it, and everybody's literally on the same page when they're looking at single receiver GPS. We can use those for some of our work in the bush where the Emlid receivers I have don't work quite as well. And then we also have them do a GPS elevation profile using the RTK GPS. And that's what I'm going to talk about most today is this elevation profile that we develop with the students. When we first started this unit, environmental monitoring, we had some feedback from students that our equipment was old and dated, especially the GPS equipment, and they weren't wrong. These were the old sort of Garmin devices with the giant square antenna, and they're great, but they weren't high precision. And our industry partners were telling us they wanted students who had experience with RTK. And so I made a case to my dean that we needed to update our equipment for this new unit that was coming on board. And I convinced her to drop a bunch of cash for this equipment. And in 2018, the 7 Emlid units with the poles and the paraphernalia that goes with it was $18K. That's what I think with a 10% educational discount as well. But the really important thing for me was that there was no ongoing operational cost, because if there had been a subscription or if there had been any kind of annual cost to these devices, I couldn't have done it because every year I'd have to go back to the dean and justify their cost. And so for me, one of the key criteria for an RTK system was that there could be no ongoing subscription. And I think I've actually told my technical staff to never update the software on these devices just in case. So that's one of the wonderful things about these is I don't have to go back every year and justify the cost to my dean. We can just use them. They work fantastic. We don't change anything. And they work really well. The second, third, and fourth, they have to be easy for students to use right out of the bat. And these are first-year university students, just out of high school, a lot of them. Some of them are mature age students coming back who don't have a lot of technical expertise. So the ease of use was a key part as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Robustness, they're famously hard on group gear. And so these units had to be able to put up with being thrown in the sand and being abused. And they've held up remarkably well in that case. And then we also want to be able to use them for flexibility research and teaching, because the other 50 weeks of the year when we're not on WAPA, we don't want them just sitting in the closet. And so we do have lots of researchers who use these devices for their research. It's just a quick picture of the M60 with the GPS status software on it. This is fresh out of the box. They have a lot more scratches now, but because they have screen covers, they're essentially still fantastic. Really easy for the students to use, Google, and beautiful. So these are the units, and this is how we have it set up. And this is one of the key parts, is we can just pop these units out of the box. I show the students how to attach them to the staff. And then I tell the students, okay, now get out your mobile phones. And we don't get to tell students that very often. Get out your mobile phones, and I want you to open up your Wi-Fi, and I want you to connect to the rover that you're holding. So we've typically got 12 students in a group. I break them up into six pairs, so six groups of 2. And then one student in each group pulls out their mobile phone, and they use the Wi-Fi number here to connect to the rover that they have in their hand. And so each student connects to their own rover. The base station's been set up previously, but the base station works with all the rovers. There's no overlap or anything like that. They just work seamlessly. And then they've got the password here is on the rover unit itself. And then what they do is they open up their web browser, and I tell them to turn away from their friends so they don't open it up into an embarrassing page or something. And so then they can just type in this web address, this number here, into their web browser. And the Emlid rover has an onboard web page that has all the location information, satellite information on it. And so the students get to see how many satellites it's looking at. They see the location. They see all the sort of the root mean square error. All of that stuff is on a web page on their mobile phone. And so they're just using their mobile phone to talk to these. There's no extra equipment needed. They get to use their own phone, and it's really, really cool. Then once the students are all sort of sorted, they've connected with their mobile phone to the unit, the base station has to be set up prior, about 15, 20 minutes prior, so that it can get all sorted in. And I've got it just sort of sitting up here at the top of the beach, and it doesn't get bothered by anybody really. And you can see the beach here is kind of this nice beach. It's got a little bit of a shelf there, which is fun to map. And then we all line up at the top of the slope in sort of a line abreast, all 6 groups. And like you saw in that introductory picture that Alistair showed at the beginning of the talk. And then we just walk down the slope, and the students collect survey points as they go down. And we talk a little bit about, how to get to those pages and stuff. But because everybody's sort of on the same page, it's very easy for me to walk up and down the line and make sure everybody's doing everything correctly. And it's so straightforward, and it's so easy. As an educator, I don't have to get stuck in these technical details. It's probably easier to run these things than it is to run a Zoom panel session. No offense, Alistair. Yeah, but it's great. It's great.
And then we just walk. Nathan, I definitely relate to the Emlid gear better than Zoom.
Yeah. And then we just walk down the beach, and they take about 10 or 12, 15 points, depending on how excited they are. And they walk all the way down to the water. They get their toes wet. And then we walk back up to the classroom. And we're doing all of this in about an hour. And that includes about a 15-minute talk about how GPS works. And I can use the beach as a chalkboard, right? And I use one of the big poles as a piece of chalk. We talk about triangulation and all that stuff. So pretty good stuff. We walk back up to the lab, and we do that. I do want to make a note. We have used these to outline plots and the like. But the units we bought are 6 years old now, and they just don't work great in thick brush. And so we could do it on the beach, but it wasn't ecologically as interesting for us for this environmental monitoring class. So we stopped doing that, but you can do that. And you can walk around with them. They're fairly robust. The students aren't going to break them. They're hard to lose. So you can do that. We get to the classroom, and then what we do is, all I do is I just tell everybody except one group to turn off their rover units. And everybody turns off their rover unit. And then I take the rover unit from one of the groups who thinks they got a great elevation profile along the beach. And this is a beach that has lots of problems with erosion and aggradation over time. And we talk about why would we do this. But I grab that group's rover, and then I open up my laptop, and I simply connect to that Wi-Fi with my laptop. I open up the web page on the rover itself, and I export their data onto my laptop. I just download it from the rover. No wires, no nothing. I just download a .csv file straight to my laptop and open it up in Excel. And this is what I get. And this is a great opportunity because we're trying to teach these students practical skills. And there's a lot of stuff that they just don't get in a theoretical, lecture online, or even in a lecture in a classroom. And so this is a great opportunity to talk about data formats. And .csv, separated values files are one of the most important file formats there is out there, because it's so ubiquitous and universal. So we talk about what it is, what it looks like in a text editor, and how it came to be. So we use that to talk about that. And then we just start looking at the data itself. And what we do is I simply I select latitude and elevation. It's a roughly east-west beach. So they're transect, the elevation profile they're taking is basically south to north. So by picking latitude and elevation, I'm able to create a very straightforward elevation profile, which is pretty accurate. You can even see this little bit of a bench on the beach that they also saw as well. So immediately the students are able to link the high precision RTK to something they've actually seen, and they can understand the value of it. And then we talk about how if we were coming back year after year, and we don't do this because we don't have the time, but if we were coming back year after year and we had an established benchmark that we could put the base station over, then we could actually track the aggradation and erosion of the beach over time. And so we talk about, what does this mean? What is this, what does this little shelf represent? Maybe it's a high tide shelf. And then what I do is I use this as an opportunity to also segue into how to make publication ready figures. Because not enough students know that you can't just take the bog standard Excel chart and put it into your paper. You've got to actually do some work to make it look nice. And so the RTK GPS is a vehicle for talking about a lot of different things, talking about how global positioning satellite systems work, for talking about beach aggradation and beach erosion, for talking about data files and how they are put together and what's useful and what's not useful, and also about how to take really interesting elevational profile and spatial data and put it into a publication ready figure to talk about in a paper. And basically that's what we do. And the students love it. They love this really slick technology. They feel like they're working with spaceships. They love it that they can just use it from their own phone. And it's an opportunity for them to take something that's a tool in their personal life and use it as a tool in their work life. I love, this is like the heavy metal ecosystem group here. It reminds me of like some Norwegian heavy metal rock band. They're really quite fun. They loved it. And that's how we use the high precision RTK GPS in this tertiary education. First year students don't have any clue. And then by the end of the hour, they're able to tell an employer, yes, I've used RTK GPS to do an elevational profile. And that's where we are. So if you want to ask me questions, happy to do it now. Or if you want to send me an email at the address there, happy to take your questions offline as well. Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Nathan. It's such a powerful example of, the simplicity of Emlid's hardware and how it's able to deliver those educational outcomes. And in relation to questions, we do have the chat open. So people are certainly welcome to add their questions to the chat. And we'll come back and revisit those at the end of the session. And we'll just answer all of the questions in one hit. And I guess there's one thing that I wanted to emphasize here, and that's the difference between Nathan's experience with the kind of first generation Emlid hardware, which was L1 only. So it's what we call single phase RTK GNSS, which is quite sensitive around vegetation, to the very latest Emlid receivers that are L1, L2, L5, and L6. So what I call many band RTK GNSS receivers. And as you can see in this image, they can perform in quite challenging vegetation environments. What I'd like to do now is to take a moment to introduce Nick Buzza, who's a teacher for surveying and mapping at the Riverina Institute of TAFE in New South Wales. Welcome, Nick.
How you going, Alistair?
Pretty good, mate. Nice to see you again. Nick and I actually go way back. I reckon about 18 years ago, we were working together in a local government GIS environment in Far North Queensland. So nice to see you again. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Nick, and give you the keys to the kingdom.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. I'll just share that. Hopefully you can see that. Is that coming up?
I suppose it's worth, just occupying a little time here. I haven't spoken to Nick for this 18 odd years. And it was a total coincidence when the team came to me and said, we've got 2 people to join the panel. And one of them's this guy, Nick Buzza. So that was a quiet thrill for me. And Nick and I actually spoke earlier today for the first time in quite a long while. Nick, we can see your screen.
You can? Okay. All right. Yes, thanks, Alistair. Yeah, it has been a long time, and 20 years nearly, wasn't it? Yeah, up in Atherton. You're still there in cold Victoria, but that's the way it is. So just a quick introduction to myself. Yeah, I'm a teacher at TAFE, New South Wales. I've been there about 10 years. I do that part-time. I'm also the spatial coordinator for an Aboriginal corporation down here.
Nick, can I just interrupt and just ask you to speak a little louder, please?
Okay, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Is that better?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, great. Thanks, mate. You're just fading into the background there.
So I'll just roughly go over what the qualifications we teach at TAFE. So you'll see on the screen there, we do a Certificate 3, Surveying and Spatial Information Service. We do a Certificate 4. The Certificate 4 has sort of a GIS stream, and then it has a surveying stream. And then they go off, if they continue on, they do a Diploma of Spatial, which is primarily GIS, and then they go and do a Diploma of Surveying, which is basically surveying, okay? So I teach all those qualifications. Obviously, there's a GPS component to all these qualifications. And so we teach GPS. I use GPS rather than GNSS, which is the correct term these days, but old school, so I use GPS, okay? So the way we were teaching it, say 5 years ago, we teach them sort of how to use a handheld GPS, okay? We were using the old Garmin's, and then for differential GPS, we're using the old Geo Explorers, if anyone remembers those, okay? All right. They were Trimble Geo Explorer. So obviously with the movement of technology, we started to sort of investigate other ways of sort of teaching GPS to these students. With regard to sort of RTK GPS, we were using some Topcom units, which are obviously very expensive. Topcom sort of total stations with RTK GPS capability. So they were about $50,000 a piece. We only had 2 of them. That also involved a subscription to the course network, which also involved money. And so with only 2 RTK GPS units, and we would have sort of, maybe 40 students, trying to share that around to go and do an RTK GPS survey as part of their sort of qualification. So moving ahead, we started to use, so if the handheld GPS, we started to use apps on phones, obviously. And then we started to look around for cost-effective sort of RTK GPS, and we came across the Emlids, obviously, yeah. So we bought about 10, I think, RS2s, yeah, which we still use to this day, yeah. So one of the advantages of that was, of course, the costs, okay. So I think at the time they were about $4,000 a piece. And the other thing was we didn't need controllers with them, okay. So we're using iPads. And in conjunction with sort of this advance in technology, we also started using drones a lot for our teaching. So we're using drones to do photogrammetry exercises, and we'd purchased a lot of iPads to use with the drone. So we had about 10 Phantoms, and we needed iPads to use those drones. So in order to, so it was a good crossover in terms of all we needed was an iPad, which we already had. We just grabbed the Emlid units and using the Emlid app to then sort of teach the RTK GPS. Okay. So it was just came together in that sort of great space. And so then we started using the Emlids. So with the Emlids, we have SIM cards in each of them, okay? So 10 SIM cards. And then we use that to connect to the CORS network, okay? And the CORS network obviously now is free if you just have a login account. So that reduces our costs as well, okay? So yeah, it was we're still using them to this day, those RS2s. And obviously with, if we have 40 students, we have 10 units, we can share and do our work a lot quicker and easier than if we were using, say, just Topcom units, which we used to use.
Nick, I just want to confirm, are we supposed to still be looking at the qualifications screen?
Yeah, sorry, I haven't got much in the way of slides.
No, that's all right. Just wasn't sure because I saw you looking down periodically and I thought, I wonder if he's changing some screens.
No, sorry.
Sorry.
I will get on to sort of some of our data that we produce, okay? So the exercises we conduct. So I will put this other screen up. So what we do, see if you can see this one up here. So this is can you see that? It should come up hopefully.
Yep, we can see that nicely. Thanks, mate.
So you can see there. Okay, so what this is one of the exercises we get the students to do. Okay, so it's a sort of multifaceted sort of work here. One is that's a drone image. Okay, if I zoom out, you'll see that's a drone image there. And with one of the exercises we get them to do is we run a drone photogrammetry exercise using a Phantom, but it isn't RTK enabled, the Phantom we use. Okay, so what we have to do is put out a series of control points to register the imagery in either a surveying package or a GIS package. And you can see here these red dots are what we've gathered in terms of there's our control point there, if you can see that. Okay. Yeah, so a little disc with a cross on it. Okay. Then we go out with the Emlid RTK GPS and we pick up that point. Okay. So we pick up a minimum of 4 points there. If I turn that off, you should see that. You can see those red dots there are the 4 points, 4 control points we've picked up when we've done the drone flight. Okay. Gone out with the Emlid RTK GPS, picked up those points, bring that into our GIS system. They get to register that drone imagery to those points, okay? And so that's one of the exercises we get them to do, okay? The other exercise we get them to do is to go out and do what's called a feature survey, okay? So that's picking up features, so it might be just, spot heights, but for this exercise, we get them to pick up the gutters, the fence lines, posts, all that sort of stuff, okay, with an RTK GPS, which is accurate to, obviously a couple of centimetres. And then we bring that information into a survey package or a GIS package, and that's one of the things we get the students to do, and then produce a map from those points they picked up, okay. So I guess one of the advantages is for us with using this technology, especially the Emlids, is, they're picking all this information up on the iPads. It's very easy to set up. It's very easy to teach the students how it works. And it's very easy for the students to download the data, which they just send to their email from the iPads, okay? But then we collate all the data together and then we produce a map like this, okay? And it can export information in a range of formats, whether it's shape files for GIS students, DXF file for survey students, or just CSV file for a range of other software. So, it's very handy and very versatile from our point of view. The other thing I just wanted to mention, if I can show that as well, is, as I think Nathan was saying before, the information, the metadata contained within the Emlid sort of recordings is actually fantastic. So you can see there, hopefully, you've got your easting, northing, latitude, longitude, elevation. Also got the errors. It's also got the information about the base station, which we like. So you can teach them a whole range of things from the data that you gather from the GPS units, which with some other RTK GPS units, it just gives you sort of simple information, okay? So we download that data and then I can explain. So it's got P-dot values and G-dot values and all that sort of stuff, which is a very good way of teaching students what these things mean in terms of how a GPS system works and what the errors can be and how they can find out what the errors are and how they can negate them. So that's a fantastic thing from our teaching point of view, that we have that information in the metadata that we gather from the Emlid recordings. So I think that's about all I wanted to say, Alistair, about how we work and what we do. Yeah.
Oh, that's really great. Thank you so much for sharing that story, Nick. It's really interesting to see that commonality of the relevance of the metadata for the receivers. And Nick, can I confirm, are you using the Emlid Reach RS2s or the Reach RS3s?
Yes. And I've got some RS3s at the other organisation I work with, the original organisation. So they're more recent purchases, and we use that for picking up cultural sites and information like that. So
yeah,
which is good.
So I can see there was a bit of discussion in the webinar chat while you were presenting about, some of the difficulties that Nathan's had with the GNSS hardware that he bought back in 2017-18. The original Reach RS, the single band receivers. So the receivers that Nick has are what we call multi-band receivers, L1, L2, E5. And Nick, what's been your experience with those receivers working around trees and buildings?
No, fantastic. Yeah, we haven't had much of an issue. I mean, the only issue we really have is if you're outside the cores network. Yeah. Okay. So then you'd have to put up your own base station if you have to. So a lot of the time, where we work with TAFE, it's not an issue, but where we work with the Aboriginal Corporation, we're out sort of in bush a lot far away from base stations, but that's fine. We have to set up our own base station if we're out sort of further than the cores network and getting the accuracy we require.
Yeah, okay. I was at an Emlid dealer conference in Budapest in early September, and the Brazilian distributor for Emlid was talking about some early product testing he was doing using the new antenna and hardware in the new series of Emlid Reach receivers and doing cadastral surveying out in the jungle using satellite-based corrections without needing to correct to any mobile internet end-trip corrections or radio corrections, which you could imagine would just be a nightmare in those environments. So I think that's a really exciting development for this latest generation of receivers, which we are yet to receive here in Australia, but are due in the next coming months. So I will just share my screen once again. There we go. No, Alastair needs to do more. Oh, no. Yeah, okay. Alastair's shared the wrong screen. Hang on a sec. See, I told you I relate better to Emlid hardware than Zoom. Okay, so that's again a picture of the latest generation stuff. I just want to highlight that for academics and anyone that has an .edu.au email account, that they do have the opportunity to take advantage of the 10% educational discount between now and the end of the academic year, or the end of the calendar year, really. So this 10% deal is available with the coupon code education if you want to buy online. Of course, if you'd prefer to use a purchase order and work with the sales team at Mangoesmapping, we'll be happy to apply that educational discount for you as well. So if you reach out to Brad or Jamie Lees at sales@mangoesmapping.com.au, they can prepare a quote for you and put into that quote any of the bits and pieces you may want to include as part of your solution. It's a great opportunity to take advantage of any remnant budget that you might have as we approach the end of the educational financial year. And certainly in previous years, we've seen a real sort of uptick in trade from the education sector at this time of year. I also thought, while we've got a bit of an audience, it's a great opportunity to share with everyone our online resources. So starting with the Mangoesmapping YouTube channel, which has a bunch of videos in it, 52 videos at last count. And this has been a recipient of awards in itself for industry workforce development and inclusion. So it is a reasonably helpful educational resource. So if you've purchased Emlid hardware or you're looking at purchasing some Emlid hardware, some of these videos will be great in terms of helping you get up and running. Additionally, we've got a heap of online resources on the Mangoesmapping website. So we've got case studies, customer stories, news and updates, tips and tricks, webinars. It's all there. This webinar will end up there as well. So do feel free to check out the resources page on the Mangoesmapping website if you'd like to learn more. And I think what we might do now is open up the session for questions. And I kind of cheekily threw in this photo, and this is a photo of me delivering some training over in Vanuatu for the SPREP Environmental Monitoring Program in the South Pacific. And I just want a quick shout out to Eldar, who I can see is in the audience. And Eldar works with Frontier SI and was critical in making the linkage between ourselves and the SPREP organisation. But what I might do now is just take a look at the channel and see what we've got in terms of questions. So I'll just start up the top there. And Patrick Dye has said, I connected with RS2 with a tablet through its hotspot. I could find it from localhost, but the Emlid Flow app didn't show up. So Patrick, I guess the first question is, have you downloaded the Emlid Flow app to your tablet? That's the first thing you will need to do. And then at the bottom of the Emlid Flow app, when you open it, you will see 3 tabs: receivers, projects, and profile. And if you go to the receiver tab, that's where you'll be able to see any receivers that you've connected to already. And if you need to connect to those receivers, you may need to go into the settings on your tablet, turn on your Wi-Fi, and look for an Emlid Wi-Fi hotspot and connect to that. And if you haven't modified the password, it'll be the default Emlid Reach password, all in lowercase. To connect to that receiver, go back to your app, hit refresh. Hopefully your receiver will be there and everything will be good. If it's not, please reach out to us here at Mangoesmapping and we'll be sure to help you move along that journey. Let's have a look here. Julie's asked, I think we've sort of covered this one about, difficulties with the devices in thick brush. That's the older hardware stuff. We don't even have that stuff for sale anymore because the new stuff is just so much easier to use and performant in those highly vegetated areas. In terms of, James has asked what cores network you use. Nick, have you got an answer to that? You'll need to unmute yourself.
I think it's just the Australia-wide one, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. So you're using the free Geoscience Australia
yeah.
AusCores network.
Yeah.
Yep. So that provides internet-based corrections directly to your rover without needing to set up a base. And that's completely free, and it's published by Geoscience Australia. There are about 700 base stations all around, or reference stations all around Australia and the Pacific. And they're particularly dense in southeast Queensland, the Queensland coastline, quite dense across New South Wales and also in Victoria. But of course, they are nationwide. The accuracy associated with connecting to AusCores is somewhat dependent on the baseline, the distance between the reference station that you're connecting to and your rover. So there's an accumulating non-linear increase in positional uncertainty the further you are from those base stations. Misty's just popped a comment in there. That level of accuracy could be very useful in remote WA also. Perhaps she's talking about the satellite-based corrections that are coming. Taris, do the Reach receivers have capacity to log Rhinex to process a known point to set up a base on, or PPK drone data? So for any fans of politics, I'd probably call this one a Dorothy Dixer. Taris is part of our support crew. And I think he's really prompting me to talk about the capability of all of the Reach receivers that we've talked about, with the exception of the Reach RX. So all of the Reach RS receivers are able to log Rhinex. And what that means is that you don't have to have real-time communication between your base and your rover. And we do a lot of commercial work doing surveying in remote far north Queensland, and our default workflow is not real-time kinematic, but post-process kinematic. So that's the PPK drone data sort of reference that Taris has there, where we log the Rhinex on the rover, we log it on the base. The first thing we do with the base, if we don't have it over a known point, is use that log to coordinate a known point for the base, and then use the known coordinates from that and the Rhinex log to then post-process the log for the rover. And then the rover will have timestamps associated with all of the data that has been collected. And we can use the timestamps and the corrected trajectory to extract really accurate coordinates for the rover for each of those points that have been observed. Patrick Dye, once again, do you think Starlight connectivity affects the positioning status of Emlid, i.e. single float to RTK? I don't have first-hand experience of this, and I suspect that neither Nick or Nathan do either, but we do have one of our other Emlid dealers that does have practical first-hand experience working with Starlink to connect to AusCores. And the latency of Starlink is pretty low. So what that means is that it is reasonable to use Starlink as a communications pathway to consume end-trip corrections. I think the biggest impact is going to be the baseline. So you can be in an area that doesn't have mobile internet, but so long as you're within a reasonable baseline, sort of 20 to 30 Ks, or I prefer less than 20 realistically, with the the positional uncertainties that I like to work towards. Because keep in mind that the longer that baseline is, the larger your positional uncertainty will be, and it's a non-linear accumulation of positioning uncertainty. How accurate the repeated single for Emlid base for correction? So I think the question here is, if we do single uncorrected observations, how accurate and how repeatable would they be? And look, it's not really that repeatable when you're using a single observation or an uncorrected observation. You can. What I like to say is that we deliver precision, but accuracy is up to the user. So even if you don't have a trusted, known coordinate that you're setting the base up, and I think Nathan's use case is a really great reflection of this. They stick the base up on top of the sand dune. They don't really care what the absolute, coordinates are for that base. They're just looking for relative accuracy between the different observations that are made at that point in time. So they stick the base up, he coordinates the base using observations that are uncorrected. Maybe he observes for a minute or two or 15 minutes and gets a coordinate and applies that as the coordinate for the base, and then uses the difference between that known coordinate and the observed coordinates of the base to calculate the corrections for each satellite channel that is then broadcast via radio to the rover. So he's going to get great precision, but he's not going to get great global accuracy. And if he were to go back and reoccupy that same point with the same base on another time and average the position without any corrections, he's going to get a very different result. It's going to be out by, I don't know, like a meter or two horizontally, and who knows, maybe even more than 5 meters vertically.
I was going to say, you could use you get an AusPos reading, yeah?
You can. So you can do static observations using your Rhinex log that you can export directly off the receiver onto your laptop. You don't need to take that through any sort of desktop or desktop software to reformat it. So if you're using Trimble, you need to download your Trimble observations and sort of post-process them using Trimble Ground Station to export out a Rhinex. With the Emlids, you can export the Rhinex directly off the receiver onto your laptop and upload it to AusPos to get your coordinate. The challenge for guys like Nathan that are still working with the single frequency stuff is that AusPos doesn't process single frequency static observations. However, there are other international services that do, like Natural Resources Canada, NRCan, and I've done a lot of post-processing of Emlid observations here in Australia to derive coordinates from static observations with L1 only receivers using NRCan service, and they're great. And when I was starting out and learning and wanting to understand more about the report that they sent me, I emailed them back questions, and they were getting back to me in half an hour with detailed responses. So thumbs up to the Canadian taxpayers for funding a great service over there in Canada. On behalf of a grateful globe, thank you very much. Margaritas and GPS, I'll take that as a comment, not a question, Nathan, but it sounds like a dangerous but heady and exciting combination. Patrick Guy, for base, it's a single baseline. The rover says it's RTK. Patrick, perhaps let's have a chat offline and we can go into your questions in detail. Really happy to work with you there and to clarify anything that you'd like to understand. And who knows, if it seems to be a common challenge, we can perhaps do a quick recording on that and put that up in our tips and tricks to help break that question down for other users. I'm not seeing any other questions come through. So it feels like it's an appropriate time to thank everyone very much, to remind them of the resources that we have available on the Mangoesmapping website, and to let you all know that we appreciate your time, and you can look forward to seeing this recording up on the Mangoesmapping resources page in the next week or so. So thanks very much for joining us. We do have some additional webinars coming up, so keep an eye on our social media. From memory, we have a webinar reviewing the new Emlid range in early December. I've got a funny feeling it's December the 4th. And there may be another one that's happening even in my absence. I'm off to New Zealand to meet with our Emlid dealers in New Zealand for the next couple of weeks. But certainly keep an eye out on our LinkedIn and other social media for information about our upcoming webinars. Nick and Nathan, thank you very much for joining us today. James, I haven't perhaps given you forward notice of this question, but have you guys taken a look through all the respondents to our poll and, hopefully randomly selected a lucky winner so that we can let everyone know in real time who's picked up the prize pack? If anyone wants to hang on for a second, we're going to shortly announce a winner for the Mangoesmapping and/or Map Gear merch prize pack. I think it just depends on what we've got in the cupboard. It's going to be, t-shirts, coffee mugs, pens, backpacks, water bottles, all that sort of stuff. The tension. This is the most suspenseful webinar I've been in for quite some time. It's bracketed by suspense at the front and the back end. First year student versus ecology work. Is that their name? Right. So Nick and Nathan, what's next in your educational program? Have what you've seen from each other's work today inspired you? Have you got any crazy ideas you're cooking up? Nick?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, there you go, Nathan. Yep.
Oh, yeah, look, I think one of the things I would like to do is eventually put in a benchmark there, figure out what the location of that benchmark is, and then do year after year surveys. So like you said, just find a way to make it work so that I can compare data from one year to the next, and also to maybe find software so I can take all 6 of those elevation profiles down the beach and turn them into actual surface.
Yeah, great.
So that the students can then see how that surface. But it's got to be something I can do within 5 minutes. So because we do have to cycle through all the groups and do it. But it's something I think about and would like to do in the future.
Well, we're happy to work with you on that. And, you know, we've got some creative people in our team, and I'm sure we can cook up some interesting procedures for you. Certainly establishing a long-term reference point that you use to sort of, you know, anchor all of your longitudinal observations in space and time is very doable. And we have a lot of experience with that in our work, observing change in complex erosion gully structures over time. So we do have a winner. It's Bisheng Fang. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name, but Bisheng Fang, you can look forward to receiving an email from us so that we can get your contact details and send you out the prize pack. So I think that just about wraps it up for today. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. It's great to have so many people choose to spend some of their special Melbourne Cup day with us. Thanks very much to you, Nick, especially, for joining us on your public holiday. We really appreciate your noble sacrifice. Nathan, as always, it's a pleasure communicating with you, and thanks for your detailed summary of the work that you guys are doing over on Great Keppel Island. Interestingly, one of the other subscribers to this webinar was Stuart Kinnenmonth, who's the station manager at Heron Island for UQ.
Nice.
I think UQ. So I didn't see him in the real-time participants today, but he'll obviously get an email with this recording as well. So I'm sure he'll be very interested.
Fantastic.
All right, thanks very much,
thanks for
everyone.
hosting us.
Let's wrap it up there. Rest my voice.
Thanks,
See you
Alistair.
next time.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. No problem.
Bye.